They dress the wounds of my poor people as though they were nothing, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. If I had to describe global climate policy in a single Bible verse, that would be the one from Jeremiah. And you can see why on this graph. The black line shows the carbon emissions as they're currently tracking at the moment, leading us towards a 4-degree of warming world. The kind of world that the World Bank says many human societies and ecosystems won't be able to adapt to. It's a world of total chaos. It's a world of somewhere between hundreds of millions and billions of climate refugees. It's not a world any of us want to get to. And so at Paris in 2016, the world's nations agreed that we need to do something about that. And they made various promises to try and keep global warming as close as possible to 1.5 degrees. All of those promises summed up together get us on that reddish line, still heading for a 3-degree world. You can see the challenge before us, that green line down there. That's the world in which those in power, those with privilege, those with resources like us, are saying, peace, peace, when very clearly there is no peace. So if I had to summarise the challenge of this graph in a song, it'd be the song that I hope you're singing today in worship. When I needed a neighbour, were you there, were you there? When I needed a neighbour, were you there? Because our neighbours need us. Our poor neighbours need us. Aboriginal communities around the country, farming communities around the country, future generations of neighbours not yet born, and all of those neighbours who aren't human, those species that we haven't already sent extinct. This is a massive challenge in front of us. If we don't get to 1.5 degrees, the barrier reef is completely doomed, as are other reefs all around the world. At 1.5 degrees, a fraction of it will be left. And that's just one example of the impact we're having on our non-human neighbours. What about the future generations? Well, what about generations that are already here? If you're watching this in a congregation and you're in your 40s or younger, I invite you to stand up. And I invite the rest of you to look at them or to think about people you know that are in their 40s, children, grandchildren, neighbours, friends. These people are completely screwed. And the offensiveness of that word doesn't come close to matching the offensiveness of the fact that we live in the richest country in the world per capita, with the highest per capita carbon emissions, and yet we are doing so little to deal with this crisis. Australia as a nation is saying to the rest of the world, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Australia just can't continue to be the Pharisee giving a tiny bit out of their wealth and feeling good about it at the temple. Australia can't continue to be the rich fool storing up wealth in our barns at the expense of the poor around the world. Australia needs to become the prodigal, repenting of our wasteful lifestyle and returning more humbly to the earth family. Even better, we need a Zaccheaus moment as a nation, true repentance, which also involves economic restitution. What wouldn't we do? What wouldn't we do as the richest per capita nation on earth with the highest emissions to take strong, immediate action to get global emissions onto that green line, to give our non-human neighbours, to give the generations coming up, to give our farming communities, to give our Aboriginal nations some hope for the future? What wouldn't we do? Because we can act. There is hope. Jeremiah didn't just condemn the wealthy leaders of his time for trying to keep the status quo. He gave a vision of hope. And we have many visions of hope as a nation. There are people out there that have worked out how we can become a 100% renewable energy nation in 10 years or so. We could be leaders around the world in renewable energy. We would have energy independence. We would have people flocking here to set up their industries using our power. We would be creating thousands of jobs for Australians into the future, clean, healthy, safe jobs. We could have carbon neutral farming, carbon negative forestry that actually absorbs carbon dioxide from the air. We could have an economy which absorbs carbon dioxide instead of releasing it. We can get down to this green line. In fact, as Australians, we have to do better than that. We have to get well below that green line. The green line is 50% emission reduction by 2030. But as such a wealthy nation that's used so much carbon dioxide in the past, if we're really going to be fair dinkum about our contribution to the solution, we need about 65% reductions. We can do it. There is a vision of hope, but it's not a big window. Scientists are telling us that we have just over 10 years to have substantially acted to reduce our carbon emissions, to be on that green line well before we get to 2030. So the question before all of us is, what aren't we willing to do? To leave the people standing around us and the people that we might think of, to leave them not only a living church, but a living planet on which to live out their discipleship together.